Welcome once again to Art Center Sarasota and our usual weekly book club with Jerry Saltz's How to Be an Artist. If you guys haven't bought the book, you really should. It's a fun one that we're going to be reading each chapter, and today we're going to be doing chapter 5. So this one is, it's about, the title is Art is Not About Understanding ... or Mastery. It's about doing an experience. No one asks what Mozart or Matisse means, or an Indian raga, or the tripping dance of Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers to Cheek in Top Hat. Forget about making things be understood. I don't know what ABBA's music means, but I love it. Oscar Wilde said, "The moment you think you understand a great work of art, it's dead to you." I love him. He's such a great author. Imagination is your creed. Sentimentality and the lack of feeling your foes. All art comes from love. Love of doing something. Look at Bosch's Horrors in Hell. They are rendered with loving attention, care for every stroke, nuance, and color. Even Francis Bacon's angry portraits come not just from his fury at his subjects, but also from a love of painting. Even if we were in agony while working, it's still some kind of love that drives us on against the current. This is a very compassionate chapter. So I'm gonna, oh, here's Barbara. All right, everyone, you wanna unmute yourselves and we can all talk? So
that was the entire chapter?
That was the entire chapter.
Oh,
they're very short and sweet.
They are very short and sweet, which allows me to read them like a poem. So this chapter, again, talks about, pointing out the fact that you do not need to have all of this schooling, all of this background. You just need to make. Just continue to make. And Carol, that was actually something that you were talking about last week too. That you were just like, okay, so what do I do? Where do I go? And this is, what he's talking about is just doing, just making. And doing it for, at this point in time, just doing it for the love of it. I always find it interesting how when we do tours around the art center and they're always like, so what was this artist thinking? And I'm like, I would love to tell you, but I can give you a good guess.
Right.
But again, I mean, that the people who are viewing, your viewers of your art, they want to know the story. Now, does that necessarily mean that there has to be a story? I don't know. I mean, do you have to have a reason behind it? What do you think?
No.
No? Susan,
No.
Why no?
I just think it builds, for me, as I say most every week, one stroke at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And often I see things that I never saw when I come back and look at it again.
Yes.
Which is, giving yourself a fresh eye.
Yeah.
And what my story is very different from what the observer's story is.
Yes.
So for me, that's a very important factor.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's the viewer's interaction with the painting that makes the creative process go beyond your own efforts.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody seems to think that they need to know.
Someone is doing art for sale.
No, I don't think it would change if it's there's two types of art for sale. And correct me if I'm wrong on this one. There's the artwork you make for you, and then there's the artwork that you make to sell because it will sell. And actually the artist Agnes Pelton, who we're going to be talking about in Salon next week,
Yeah.
that's how she made her living. She made work, and her work that she embraces and that is actually going to be showing at the Whitney when the Whitney reopens is her work. Whereas the work that she was doing in order to make a living as an artist were realistic forest scenes. So, you have to weigh that level of like, how do you want to support yourself? Do you want to support yourself on your art, or do you want to just, support yourself in another way and then make the art that you want to make? Joseph, with your work, how do you feel on that?
I don't think much about the audience. I think about me following my bliss.
Mm-hmm.
And everything that I paint is something that moves me. And whether it moves someone else or not, that's immaterial. And I guess that's why I'm not financially successful like some artists are. Because I don't really care.
Where's the violin?
Right.
I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't know. I own one of yours, Joseph. Actually, I own two of yours. So
That's right, you do. Fact is, I was working on my record keeping and your name cropped up yesterday.
Betty.
It's possible that art is not about understanding or mastery, but I think both of those are essential to the artist, not necessarily essential to the viewer. And even if a person doesn't have mastery, striving toward it is very important. And I think that is not to discourage somebody who has absolutely no experience, because I think we're in one of the areas where education is not essential to making great art.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I think that mastery is something that artists should be aware of. And I know that especially now in art schools, having the student understand intention is a very important part of their training to become an artist.
Yeah. A lot of the schools are pushing the fact that you need to be able to, and I think this goes back to a little of the, of getting away from like the post-expressionists and we're just going to put something on the canvas and not explain it. And then add in Andy Warhol or other artists who are using text, who are trying to actually make a statement. So you've got the political artists from, the Vietnam era making statements. And then you've got the other artists who were just making art because the process was the thing that drew them. And to meld those two into school teaching now is what they're trying to do. To provide the students with both the background to make that choice. Because without all of the history, which is why we have to go through all those core classes and learn the basics and learn from the bottom, but we have so much more history to go through and so many more movements now that it becomes, there are so many voices to hear and so many views to see that the students sometimes get lost. And the teachers will always say, okay, well, you need to find your voice. And finding your voice is not
sorry.
the thing. No.
Right.
Now, Betty, I have a question for you.
Yes.
You work both in watercolor and in sculpture. What moved you to try your hand at the sculpture when you were focused on the watercolor? I'm just curious. This is me.
Actually, it is exactly the reverse.
Okay.
It was a sculptor for over 40 years. And at the same time, and I also was teaching. So when I retired from teaching, I began to get more involved in life drawing from a live model. That sort of led me toward painting and expressing things on a flat surface more.
Mhm.
And I always was interested in watercolor, but intimidated by it. I came to Sarasota and took a few workshops in watercolor and then became hooked on it. I've done more watercolor recently and
Okay.
possibly a little less sculpture.
Which is funny because I'm like, all of a sudden Betty starts putting in these sculptures. I'm like, where did these come from? So thank you. Actually, that's a great thing to know. And Karen, you're Karen Knudsen. How many do I have Karens here? But Karen, you have your teaching and your painting process is very intuitive.
Yes, it is. But I was going to say about the intention thing.
Yeah.
I let myself have fun with no intention to start with. Very, very loose and very, very fun.
Right.
Lots of times I may have a value study. I do like working out some of the design elements of something before I go, but then the painting, almost always, especially with this pandemic, oh my gosh, it has been speaking to me, and things have happened in my paintings that I have the rule, and I tell all my students this too. If they're 3/4 of the way through the painting, they better have a title for that painting. No, they are not, their heart and soul is not in that piece. Okay. So I allow myself the chance to have fun and all that stuff. But once the painting starts developing, I have a title and I go towards that goal. So, and I think it's been a real successful thing. And actually Carol Barnes is the one who taught me that, to always have a title for your work, because you're not going to get your soul in it. So
Yeah.
It's been a good lesson.
Yeah, I had
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Oh, Karen, are you, again, I will, in case you didn't hear, I live in North Carolina. My son lives in Sarasota, so I come and visit often.
Okay.
Are you, Karen, somebody who has a video out on Streamline?
I do, yes.
Oh my gosh, I have to, I'm sorry we're off subject, but they Streamline, if you all don't know, has every day they're posting about an hour of different videos for free. And I just watched yours. As how what a coincidence.
Yeah,
and because your name Knudsen is kind of an unusual name.
For a shameless plug, you can also take Karen's workshop later in 2021. So.
But was that in person? Oh,
that'll be in person.
Oh, and that'll be at your art center.
It will be at the art center.
See, this is so good.
All right, so
This is kind of like painting. One thing leads to another.
I know.
it does.
I know.
Which is why I like our little discussions. I mean, I don't get bored every week at
Yeah.
all.
Wait a minute, how do I get to see everybody? For some reason, I have just a sample of 9
Okay.
people. Where's
Okay.
the rest?
So if you click the speaker view,
My
there's
what?
it says gallery view up there in the right hand corner.
How many people are at this meeting?
Right now we have 21 people.
Oh, so you can't see 21 people.
No, because not everyone has their video on. So Leslie, can you tell us a little about your process?
You're talking to me?
Yes.
Well, I'm very interested in this discussion around intention, because I also feel that you need to have intention. It might come and go, or it might change when the work that you're doing speaks to you in a new way, or if you're not able to sit down and do it in an hour. I've never tried that, probably, but certainly I've had the idea in an hour. But some if you go away and come back, I can't remember who was that, Betty or somebody spoke about that. You may have had some experiences, read something, seen some other art, just looked at the sky, and new ideas come, or you look at the work and you see something new in it and it takes you in a new direction. But I feel strongly that I need to be intentional. And, you know, yes, I also need to let go of, I'm a designer by training. So, you know, it's all about setting requirements and limitations and, you know, design elements when you're in school doing that. But as an artist today, I have to let that sort of sit in the background, and so that you just, you intuitively know, oh, this is out of balance, or, you know, there's no focal point, that sort of thing. But intention around content and what I'm communicating from within myself and being aware of that is very valuable. You know, when he talks about in the book here, the examples he gives, Mozart and Matisse and Fred Astaire, these are all experts in their little way, big way, certainly in most cases. So, you know, these are experienced people who their work has lived through, you know, the ages. And, you know, we may or may not want that for ourselves, but I'm pretty sure that the great artists that felt, you know, that really created wonderful work that we still love today probably worked with intention.
Mm-hmm.
I think a good example of that is Picasso. I mean, he knew all the basics and was extremely skilled at drawing and painting. And then he went off and did his own thing. And I think that's the way art is. It's that way with me. I learn the basics, and then after I get that in my system, then I start seeing other ways of doing things, and then just pull out the stops and go for it. And I think I think a lot of artists work that way and a lot don't. I think how you make art is a pretty individual type thing. And that's why in my classes, I try not to influence people to paint a certain way. I don't want them to paint like I paint. I want them to paint the way they paint. Mm-hmm. And I encourage them to do that.
I mean, I find that with my work, I mean, yes, I have to have, you know, at the end, we do have to have a meaning or try to explain it because people like that story. But, or even, you know, the funny thing is that why we are explaining it, are we justifying it? I don't know. But for me, the process, the going through the movements and going through the process and the mindset that I get put in when I am creating work and I am making, and I lose track of hours and the day has gone by and I'm just kind of in that zone, that is my happiest place. And right. It's my most productive place. And it's the most, it's that, you know, runners talk about a runner's high. Artists have, like, we get in the zone and we're like, don't disturb me.
Right. But at being an abstract painter where it's color and shape and form are what excite me, mm-hmm. and if people want to know what it means, I'm at a loss for words, because it's just balancing the colors and how they flow through the painting. So it's really hard to have people understand, or I send things off to my family. So that includes, you know, sons and daughters and granddaughters. And someone will always say, well, I don't like the color, but I think it's nice. Okay. And that makes me laugh. You know, it's like,
you're the grandmother.
And we get that. Like, you know, when I do the kids' tours, right? They'll be like, what are they trying to say? There's like a whole bunch of splattered paint all over the place. I'm like, okay, so what you do is you turn it back on them and you say, well, how does it make you feel?
Yeah.
What do you think? What do you see? You just, instead of having you explain it, let them find their reason behind it.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Yeah. Out of the mouth of 8-year-olds, trust me.
Yeah.
Or adults.
Or adults, yes. Yeah. Sharon.
Well, I was just thinking that I'm not sure that it's an either or thing, as in understanding or mastery versus doing and experience. Because I think the understanding, if you interpret it to be understanding of the tools of your trade, so to speak, and mastery of those and developing a vocabulary and a toolbox, then that becomes the underlying, even unseen foundation of what you're doing. And you get there by the doing and experience.
Yes.
And then if you extrapolate experience, I think it also has to do with probably more subconsciously, at least I think for me, than consciously, with what your experiences in the world are, what you've read, what you've seen, what you've liked, who you've met, where you've been, you know, all those things influences. But I don't think it's either or.
No, I have to totally agree with you. I think that it's, again, you know, I probably have talked about this over and over and over again, but it's the culmination of all of your experiences, all of your, everything you've seen, everything you've experienced is never, ever going to match up with anyone else's. So no one will see what you see. And the same can be said even with, like, you know, when we're all told that grass is green, right? But what I see as green could be totally different from what you see as green, but we all know it's green. Trying to explain this to the kids in camp is always fun, because half of them get it and the other half are like, huh? And the ones that do are like, what? You mean like the red they see is not the red I see? I'm like, yeah, everyone's eyes are different. We're all unique. Think of it that way. And how we interpret the world is uniquely ours. And the sum of our experiences create what we are unconsciously and consciously putting onto our canvases, our sculptures, and whatnot. Barbara Eisenberg, can I pick your brain for a second? Hit the space bar.
Yeah, it's just on mute.
Yeah. Maybe. No. Okay. We'll try that again later. Yes, Betty. You have to unmute too.
You could unmute them yourself.
No, I can't unmute them.
Hi, now?
There she is.
Oh, you both are here. Okay, good.
So, you know what? I've been trying to talk for 2 weeks, and I've been talking to myself.
Barbara.
Over here. I mean, honest to goodness, this is really funny. Okay, excuse me. Go on.
All right. So, Betty, what did you have to add to that? And then I'm going to pick Barbara's brain.
No, it's okay.
Back to understanding and the work in the studio, I think. I think art is a dialogue. And it's not only a dialogue with the person who's looking at it, but it's a dialogue between you and the art piece that you're making. And this was implied by several people who have mentioned a few things. But I think that you start a piece, you respond to it, it kind of leads you to doing what comes next. And there's a dialogue between you and the piece in the best situation.
I love that word. Dialogue that's like the nail on the head. Good. Yeah.
Very cool.
Also, I think there is a dialogue with the viewer. And one of the things that I think that it's really important to respect about a viewer, especially if they have no understanding of art, is that they're still responding. Even if they don't like that color, or whatever they have to say is a response to what they're seeing. And I think that as artists, we are trying to get our viewers to respond in a certain way to a degree. And if they don't, and that's part of the fun, because some of the art is very ambiguous and having many meanings, and having a viewer come to the piece from different angles can be very exciting. If you've ever had a piece on view in a gallery and you've listened to what people have to say about it that surprise you, that's a lot of fun.
Yeah. No, I know. It's like, trying to convey what you're trying to say, or are you trying to say anything? So both Carol and Barbara Eisenberg work predominantly in abstract. And Barbara, with your abstract work, how
Right.
have you gone about trying to engage the viewer, or do you think that you do it?
Sorry.
Just
What was that?
This could be a painting with sound effects.
Are you with me?
Yes.
Okay, just to show you something totally different than you're sort of asking me.
Okay.
Here
No,
are
that's fine. Go for it.
Here are abstractions. I'm down in my studio, aka basement. These are abstractions too of a place. So well, it's hard to do this, but what I want to show you is that my abstract is not always of no place. I mean, that is a beach place in Charlevoix, Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes I want to show my abstractions a place that people can relate to because they've been there or they want to go there. Or here's a pathway, another place in Charlevoix. And somebody can actually say they've been there or they want to go there. As compared to, all right, this kind of abstraction. Whoops, where are you? So now I forgot the question. What's the question? Tell me the question again. It's about.
The question is, how do you feel that you need to, interpret for the viewer, or do you make for you?
Okay. One of the most exciting things to me is to have a big, plain old white canvas with nothing on it. And that is just so exciting. The first stroke, which leads to the second stroke. And then somewhere along the line, it becomes a mass of things. And I start to think about what somebody there, or what they'd like to see there, or what I can add to make it have more meaning to it, or is it just a bunch of shapes and colors? So I do include how I would like somebody to relate to it. I do. Yeah. And my intention is to make a many layered thing that someone can read their own story into. So that is my intention. And I do always include the viewer at some point after like the first 3 layers of something. And when I teach, I suggest the same thing, that at some point there has to be some sort of interpretation. And that's why we have all the critiques all the time. What's happening there? It's more than just about harmony and shape and repetition. It's sort of what is happening there that makes somebody want to stay there and look at it and analyze it and enjoy it or hate it or whatever they were. Okay.
No, and that's always like kind of the kicker. It's like, for me, I know that it was always the way that you knew you had done painting right was that you got the viewer to stand there longer than like the 2 seconds it took to walk past it. Like they stopped and they looked. If they stopped and looked, then you had succeeded in making something.
Right.
Don't know what.
It's a very exciting thing to come through the art center and to kind of pretend that you're nobody, well, that you're just like standing around yourself and watching somebody relate to your work. It's so flattering. It's so, I mean, it just it makes me want to keep painting.
Yeah, and well, that's half of the thing. I will float around the galleries and I'll listen to what people say, and then I will tell you guys what people have said about your work. And usually, unfortunately, it's most of the kids' tours that I get to hear their voices in it. But actually, their views are probably the freshest and the least inhibited and truest that you can get. So, although they do get fixated on how much does that cost? But Bethy, with your paintings, you're doing more abstract right now, right?
No, right now I'm doing realism. I go back and sometimes I'm doing it at the same time.
Okay.
I'm vessels. So I'm doing singular pieces I'm doing teapots right now. And I started to do that a while ago. They're not, for the most part, really tight realism. At least I'm trying to not have them be real tight. And I think, I started to do them without a intention and without really probing too deep about what attracted me to them. But I come to the understanding that everything that I've painted, and I've painted quite a few of them, is something waiting to be filled. And I think it has something to do with where we are at this. We're kind of in because they're all solitary pieces. We're in a kind of, each one of us solitary and in some way waiting to be filled. So that's my take on them. Now, someone else may look at them and say, "Oh, there's a teapot." Fine. Painting them for myself and getting a lot out. So that's my realistic side. And at the same time, I am doing paintings that are more abstract by cleaning off my palette. And you laugh at that, but I love some of the
Not
people
at all.
are amazing, if I do say so myself. And I had someone come through and I was showing some of them to them, and this person said, "I love that piece." And so off it went with them. And it was purely something that I had done by cleaning off a palette. So there you go.
Can we see one of her teapots? What do they look like?
Oh, sure. I'll be back in half a second. I'll go fetch one.
I'm curious.
Me too. I haven't seen these yet. She sent me poems last week, so.
Oh.
So do you think part of the responsibility of the artist is to know the mediums, to learn what each of the mediums can do, to come to the canvas with at least some knowledge about how to work with this medium?
I
Not
would
necessarily
say,
how they interact, but
Irene, I would say half and half, because if you come to the canvas with all the knowledge that you think of a medium, you're never going to push past that knowledge.
okay.
So if you continue to experiment and utilize your imagination in ways that you hadn't thought, I mean, I wouldn't have thought to use rubbing alcohol or mineral spirits with oil pastels, but they work. And crayons, and all of a sudden I've got this whole different texture that wasn't there, but the vibrancy of color still is. Or you, Susan, with folding of the paper that we talked about a couple years ago.
Yeah.
And how that canvas was changing from just a flat surface to a transformative surface. So going in knowing saying that you know everything about a medium, I think is more of a handicap than
maybe knowing some things.
Yes,
Because
definitely.
How many of us feel like we're really faux artists? I mean, I do most of the time, and then I go back up and look at my studio and say,
but it becomes also, do you treat it as a profession? Are you a practicing artist, or do you just call yourself an artist because you've made stuff here and there? That, the practice is what he's talking about. It's the experience and going through the motions again and again that kind of, retrains your brain to just kind of always be a visual device.
Yeah.
We're more visually aware of the world than any other group of people. As artists, we see everything. Do we remember it all? No, not usually, but
I think we see different too.
yes, we definitely see differently.
That's the way I see the world too, because when I'm like right where I am in my studio, I look this way and I see woods. And I look this way and I see a golf course in my backyard. And I've done a lot of work to landscape it. And so when I walk outdoors, this happens with everything, even when I'm indoors. Everything I look at, I can't help it. I see it as the genesis of a painting.
Mhm.
Wow.
It's so true. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And when I look out the window, I'm looking at a composition. I'm looking at positive and negative shapes. I can't help it.
Yeah.
Because that's the way I am. And after teaching for over 60 years, teaching people to see this way, I mean, I just can't help it. I just see the world that way. And so I can't get enough of it. And I can't do enough paintings because I've got so much going on visually. I can't keep up with all of it.
Well, and I think
I find it really, really exciting.
And I think that's also why we need a studio space, because that studio space is a space that, even though a lot of artist studio spaces are, chock-a-block full of so much stimulation, to us, it's calming. Because you go out in out in the world and you're like, ooh, there's this and that, and ooh, squirrel. And if I'm in my studio, it's a space that I'm like, I know where things are technically. And if I put them back in the right place, and I know it's arranged in a way that it's not going to distract me as much.
Isn't that interesting though? Because I think for me, if I have everything in order, I kind of work out of the chaos of my studio, out of the colors that are sitting there, the pencils, the pens, the paint, because I love to make marks. So someone said, well, how do you know what color to use? It's like, I have a sense of color, but if everything wasn't chaotic and it was too organized for me, I couldn't think like that.
Oh no, my studio is not anywhere near organized, but at least like glue goes on this shelf. So
Organized.
papers on that shelf, but everything like when I'm working on gets strewn all over the room.
Yes.
So, yeah.
I'm here with my teapots.
Oh, your teapots.
Oh, nice.
Lovely.
So
Lovely.
I want to see your brush strokes. Can you put it closer?
Here, wait, let me spotlight it. Then you guys can.
Yeah, I like to see the edges. Oh, wonderful.
Wow.
So this is another one, and this is to me is kind of an interesting thing.
Oh, the pattern on it. Yeah.
Is that these are all, I've got a collection of teapots, so they're all very special to me and have a lot of emotion and memory with them. And these are a couple of palette cleaners.
Yeah.
I love this.
And I find that just as exciting.
It is, because this one I want to grow up, oil and cold wax.
Beautiful. I love it.
Nice.
So those are fun.
You're gonna send me one of Grammy's teapot paintings, right?
I can do that.
Okay.
I'm doing a chocolate pot right now, Elizabeth. Do you remember the chocolate pot?
Yes. I also would like a teapot with stripe.
Do the main.
I know, I can just paint one myself, but yeah. You have all the teapots, or mom does. So, yes, Betty.
I just would like to come back to the idea of mastery for just a second.
Please, yes.
Because we're.
I didn't hear what she's went.
Coming back to what? I missed that.
She wants to come back to the topic of mastery.
And
Okay.
I totally agree that you need to be open to trying new things, even if you are very familiar with your medium. But when I think about, you mentioned that I'm a sculptor and that I also paint. Well, I made a series of 20 large sculptures, all related to each other. And the first one I made collapsed. And the second one I made also collapsed.
Oh, no.
And the third one I made did not collapse. And so I continued and I made a whole series of these very large sculptures. But it was not until I had mastered the technique of making them that I was able to be creative with the form.
Mm-hmm.
I think that mastery is critically important if you're going to go beyond a certain stage with a medium.
What was the medium?
Clay, ceramic.
And did you start with an armature?
No, I invented a method of using interior walls that eliminated the need for an armature.
That's interesting.
And they stopped collapsing.
I think you're right in that sense, but then we also get to that fine line of craft and art. So as a printmaker, I can, someone could be, I could say, okay, here's a piece of linoleum and here's the press and some tools, just carve stuff. But they don't know how to use the press. They don't know how to wet the paper. Mastery in that way, I would say yes. And how to conserve the clay so that it's not going to dry out in an uneven fashion. But this, when I'm thinking about the way that I was thinking about mastery was meaning that, like, you don't need to master the material in painting, I feel. With watercolor, I don't know if mastering watercolor is the way to go, or even acrylic paint. I think that if you continually push yourself, that you'll find new ways, just like you did with the first two that collapsed, Betty. The third one worked because you had figured out what was not going to work. I don't know.
Elizabeth, I think that
I think
what
I
we're
might be doing
talking
that.
about is this philosophy of either or. Either I know everything, or I don't go in and paint.
Yeah.
But I think it's both and I think that's what we're talking about. Having some sense of the materials that you use and then play with them.
And
so
maybe
it's both and.
Maybe mastery is a misnomer. Maybe that's not the right word to use.
Knowing enough. Or listening enough. Listening enough, watching enough, looking at enough.
I like that term, knowing enough.
Knowing enough, yeah.
Because you don't have to know a lot. You just have to know enough to get started and do something credible.
Well,
and lots of expertise beyond knowing enough. But I think that's a good way of looking at it.
Yeah, and mastery kind of goes back to, like, Renaissance, where we had the old masters and they had a whole school and apprentices and all that kind of stuff, and we don't have that really anymore. So we need a new term for it. It's not really mastery anymore.
We have different materials.
Yeah.
And the whole evolution of art has changed from what it was back then.
And
so
theories of thought, and
it all intertwines.
And for lack of a better term, what is normal? So
well, I just don't know. And I was in that field for years.
Exactly. Sharon.
I was reminded of a class I was in a few years back where there was a lecture on color mixing, where oil painting was concerned and landscape painting. And the lecture was in the studio, in the classroom. And somebody said something along the lines of, oh my God, how am I ever going to remember all this when I go out to paint? And the instructor said something along the lines of, well, you're not. It's not your job when you're out there painting. When you're out there painting, it's to do. And when you're in the studio, you may be learning and practicing, but when you go out into the field to paint, you're just trying to think about painting, not think about how do I mix that color. And over time, because you've combined the two, the learning and the going out and doing, over time you'll internalize it and you'll find your own way of mixing too. Mm-hmm. And I think it is
Yes.
That brings up something else that I'm thinking about too. I do a certain amount of plein air painting, and Plein Air magazine features a lot of plein air painters. And usually when I look at the magazine, I find one, maybe two artists in the whole magazine that I find exciting, because most of them are doing stuff that's already been done before. And then I look at the couple of them that have a new or a different creative twist to how they're doing everything. And that's what attracts my eye, is to constantly be aware of nuances, things that happen, and jump on those instead of discarding them. Some people will discard it because it's not the norm, it's not what everybody's doing. But that's where the creativity is. Yeah. And I think creativity is, especially in the plein air painting field, is grossly underrated. And I think that's a big mistake.
Now at plein air, do they, are plein air painters encouraged to just paint what they see or be a little creative?
It depends on the teacher. And some teachers, they want to get that aqua color in the water or the sky. They want to be very precise in how they do it. And I think that's a waste of time. I think how you present everything, all the components of the painting and the final piece is what counts, not how well. That's why it's so, not how well you mix the color, is it that exact color? And that used to drive me nuts years ago when I painted in watercolor, because so many of the workshop instructors would have like 40 or 50 different shades of everything. And you had to memorize everything that was in there in the workshop. And to me, that's why I started reducing my palette to fewer and fewer colors. And it forces you to mix colors and see what they actually do. And when you do it that way, you tend to remember it better than an academic way of being very precise in the mixtures. It's in a way, it's like cooking. I cook the same way that I paint.
I do too.
Yeah.
No recipes.
No. A little bit of
Yeah,
this.
but that's
little
how
that.
right. I have people say, well, give me the recipe. Well, I don't know.
Yeah,
It never tastes the same twice.
That's right.
Can anybody paint the same thing twice? Like if you do one good painting, can you do another one very much like that? I can't. I struggle with.
Carol, that's called printmaking.
No.
Well
The
said.
painting that I have behind me is the second version of a painting I did.
True. Joseph is the multiple king.
Yeah, he is.
Because every time I do it, I can't help it but see what I could do a little bit different.
Right.
Even if I tried to duplicate it, that would be so boring to do.
Uh-huh.
That would be an illustrator trying to do something.
How many times have you painted the barn painting?
Big part.
How many times have you painted the barn painting, and how many colors has it been?
I've painted it probably at least 10 times. Each time it's a different color palette.
Exactly.
The sky's a different color, the water's a different color, the trees are different.
Squirrel that climbs up.
It's always got that palm tree.
And some people, when they paint a palm tree, they have to put all the little spike things that, you know, the palm fronds and everything. And to me, blam, one brush stroke, and that's the palm branch. And I don't try to do it like a researcher doing looking for plants in
A botanical painting, right?
Yeah, botanical painting. I just don't approach it that way at all.
But you know, you have a different personality than somebody that does a botanical painting.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've got a friend that is a botanical expert with certain flowers, and I used to paint that way, but then over the years I evolved, and some people don't evolve. I've got another friend in Louisiana that I knew when I was in college, and he paints exactly the same way he did 50 years ago.
Wow.
And I find that really amazing because I've changed so many times. And I, you know, I'm still learning new things, and I find new excitement in every new nuance that I come across. And that's why I like to see what other artists are doing, because I'll see some little thing that they're doing and it excites me.
Yeah.
And so some people will say, well, I don't like the way he's doing that or she's doing that.
And I think that excitement is kind of what sums up this chapter, really, is that he's talking about how this love, this passion, this excitement, the drive is continually there. And on that note, we'll end.
Another fabulous
Do you guys want to continue? Because it's 3:00. We can. If you're enjoying this conversation,
It is. It's very interesting.
I would like to.
Elizabeth,
Yes?
I'm here to report I went back to the studio.
Did
since
you?
the last conversation.
Yay, Susan!
So
That's wonderful.
that's why I'm here.
I wanted to say one thing about boredom.
We don't say the B word here.
I know. I don't even know what the word means, because I don't think I've ever been bored.
Yeah.
Because I have so many interests, and being an prop and set builder and special effects and all that kind of stuff, you know, I see the world as my plum, that there are just so many things to think about and things to do and books to read and all that kind of stuff. And if anybody hasn't read Robert Henry's book, it's a must read. And that
What's the name?
Robert Henry. He was one of the Henri. In France, it would be Henri. But he was a teacher in the early 20th century, and influenced a lot of people. And he was a wonderful teacher, and just reading his statements are almost like poetry. They address art in the essence of what art is. And it's wonderful.
That's the art spirit.
That's the art spirit.
The art spirit, yeah.
Okay.
It's on the shelf back there.
Yes. Yes. I will put that one up again. I think we mentioned that like a couple weeks ago.
Well, I'm sorry that I missed the last few weeks because I didn't even know it was going on.
Well, you're here now. If anyone has missed any of the other chapters, we do have videos up on the discussion board. If you go to explore on the Art Center website, it has all of the previous book clubs and the art salons if you have missed them.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've done that took me out of my usual was to make some wood sculptures that my family wants to put in gardens. So two of them are 48 inches tall by 4 inches in diameter. They're square, and 2 of them are 36 inch. And I had so much fun, except for the fact that you have to paint so many layers before you get. I'm hoping that if I do,
Carol,
Sorry.
I'm sorry. The iPad.
Like she tripped over the dog.
I saw her foot.
we'll send you a tablet stand.
Well, I thought there is a stand here on this little
Oh, they never work.
the cover, but maybe I got too excited and I talked with my hand. I need to find a better type of wood to use so that you don't have to use up so much paint until you get what you want. This was just whatever was left over at Home Depot, I think. But they turned out great, and they're really a lot of fun. So it adds a dimension.
The best wood in the world for carving is basswood.
Yeah, but
BASS?
Yeah, basswood is one and Tupelo is another. I used to do a lot of sculpture many years ago.
Well, this isn't really sculpture. It's just square.
Uh-huh.
So I'm not carving anything. I'm just...
The problem with pine and things, mostly pine that you see at Home Depot,
right.
The grain is so prominent that it influences what you're doing on the surface.
Yeah.
And
So-
basswood and Tupelo gum are two woods that have virtually no grain.
which might
you-
be
would you spell
not
that?
easy to get.
But
How do you spell it? T?
Tupelo, I think.
And what was the other one?
Basswood.
Oh, okay, that I know.
Like the fish. Basswood, they make, Yes.
I got it. So,
Okay.
love ya.
Love you.
Yes.
Nice talk, everyone. See you next week.
Okay,
Bye,
yeah, I'm gonna
Elizabeth.
check out also. It was nice meeting all of you.
Oh, yeah. Good meeting you.
So this is every week at the same day and the same time?
Yep. And
Yep.
if you want to hang in there, we're still talking, but if you
Yeah,
go.
I better return a phone call. But,
okay.
all right, thanks so much.
And thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, I can't wait to get back to Sarasota.
Good.
July. Okay, thank you. All righty, bye-bye.
Annie, are you taking off?
Yeah, I am. Oh.
I can't wait to get back to teaching at the art center.
I know. Yeah, Joseph, you and I need to meet. I have to get a few things set up, but Karen, I have to talk with you too, and Barbara Eisenberg went poof, but I have to talk with her too. So
I've got to go to.
Okay.
Bye. This has
All
been
right.
great.
So to sum everything up, next week we will be doing, while I still have a few faces on the screen, I know, next week
I
we'll
want to hear. I'm not
be
leaving
doing
yet.
chapter 6, which is embrace genre.
Okay.
Who knows? And
Right.
remember, please, if you enjoyed this, to donate to Art Center Sarasota. We love you guys all, and we will see you soon. We will be opening on Wednesday.
You'll just take a check. You'll
Yes.
just take a check.
I'll take a check. Yes. I
Check, money,
Bye.
cash.
you can put money in the envelope, and I'll take that too. But again,
Right. I'll wash it.
thank you,
before I
Jerry,
give it to you.
for letting us use your book.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, bye.
Okay. Got everyone? And there we go.
Oh, Elizabeth, I wanted to ask you one question.
Yes.
The show that's up right now at the Art Center, is that the one that was started just less than a week ago?
No, that's the virtual show. That
Oh,
one will be, the virtual member show is up online. The current show that is up on the walls is the one that we had up in March.
oh, okay.
You do
So,
not have to pick up anything until July 1st or 2nd.
oh, okay, okay. And something else I need to do, I'm really negligent about it, is getting the site, art site,
Yeah.
getting that up to date. I need to change everything that's on there.
Yes, and you can, Danielle is in the office tomorrow.
So she is?
Yeah. We'll all be in the office tomorrow, but we won't be open.
Mhm.
But
Okay.
give us a call and we'll she'll get you fixed up on that.
Okay, I'll get together some paintings because I've got a lot of paintings since then.
Yeah.
And-
Yeah.
and-
And like I said, you and I need to sit down and figure out what we want to do for